Jean Marie, and I am the founder and executive director of the August Project, who's partnering on this. I'm also lucky enough to serve as chief of staff for the Haitian American Caucus US. Today, we will be discussing domestic violence as it specifically pertains to women, and specifically during this time of Corona, this unprecedented pandemic that has a number of issues associated with it, including a rise of domestic violence. Today, luckily, we have two amazing guests, and I'll introduce them to you. First, we have Shirley Paul. She's a lawyer, and she was slated City and State's 40 Under 40. She's also a Democratic candidate for the New York City Council. Shirley?
Thank you, Ruth. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to join all of you tonight to talk about, as you said, some of the issues that have taken a different take in this coronavirus pandemic. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. We know that you have to be busy, so we appreciate you making the time. We also have Jacqueline Rowe, the founder of Face My Abuse, that advocates for domestic violence survivors and those who are currently experiencing it. Ms. Rowe?
Hi, good afternoon, ladies, and thank you for having me. Looking forward to this discussions.
I am too. I think that the conversation we have tonight will definitely impact a lot of people who may not even be able to identify domestic violence abuse if they are themselves are experiencing it or if they see it amongst their friends. So I'm excited about what we're creating tonight. I feel like I sound like a news reporter. But I do want to just do some background. So I've read a little bit about both of you. And I do want you guys to communicate to the audience how you've come to get caring about domestic violence survival. What was your personal journey to this topic or through this topic?
Well, for me, I was a victim for 10 years. So I'm a survivor now for the last 25 years. Devastating experience for me because I really couldn't believe that a man could actually really treat a woman like this. And I was like, for a long time, I didn't get it. You know what I mean? And so after getting it, I got out, thank God. And I started advocating in 2004. I broke my silence and I contributed to a book called Souls of My Sisters with 72 other contributor writers. And my story just got rave reviews. And I just started, advocating about it because I was well known in the community and well known in the entertainment business. So I thought it was something that was a voice that was missing. And we're talking about 20 years ago. And I just started advocating. A lot of people were shocked that I took that up to start talking about it because I saw the need where everybody else had their heads down and being embarrassed about it. So I wanted to, use my platform to be able to speak about it and let it, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. So I just got very involved. I had a lot of people come to my walks and broke their silence. I had Nicki Minaj's mother. I had Erica Mena. I had Terry Woods. I had a list of very high profile people that was the first time that they ever opened up and spoke about domestic violence at my walk.
Nice. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Ms.
you.
Paul?
Sharing your story. I myself decided to become an ally for domestic violence, for victims of domestic violence, because of the domestic violence I witnessed as a child, that I saw in other families and friends. And in particular, when I was in college, I started working at a drug treatment court. And through that experience, I recognized that domestic violence is not limited to that traditional lens of it's a battle between a couple. It can happen within families. It can be siblings. It can be in-laws, any intimate relationship. Through my experience at that treatment court, there were victims there who through coercion became substance abusers. And that was a result of being in a domestic violence situation. So I decided to be an ally and break the stereotypes that it's not just between an intimate partner, and it's happening all the time, and we shouldn't be silent.
Thank you for that. And I'm glad both of you said a few things that I want to delve into today. The idea of domestic violence impacting children that might not necessarily be immediately hit, but that are witnessing it. And Ms. Rowe, I read that you also found that your mother was a survivor of domestic violence yourself from your biological father. I know you didn't mention that, but I read something you wrote on the internet. What would you guys say was the impact of witnessing this sort of abuse, especially by someone I'm going to assume you love, your father? What would you say is the impact on children who may not necessarily feel it physically, but may experience it vicariously? Miss Rowe, you can begin. You can start if you want to, or sure, Miss Paul, you can too. But
well, for me, having my two sons see me go through it, it was, you know, it was. I didn't like it. I was very upset about that. I don't think no children should ever see their parent being abused. I don't think, you know, that's something that a child should see, because I think that abuses their mentality from that point on. You know what I mean? So I totally didn't like it. You know what I mean? Like, to be fighting and arguing in front of my sons. I just think no child should be able to should be able to bear that at such an early age.
totally agree.
For me personally, what I've been able to observe and I can relate to myself, I think domestic violence, not only I agree with Ms. Rowe, that not only shouldn't a child witness those
Mhm.
kind of interactions between adults that are supposed to love each other, but I think it has a greater impact on us as we grow up. It affects our relationships. It affects, how we in turn treat our kids, how we in turn treat our partners, and ultimately how we view ourselves. So the impact can be more detrimental than you yourself. I mean, you can either become an abuser, get abused yourself, or just don't feel like you're worthy. So, that's why I think it's so important to break that pattern so we can, help our young people
And I
before
want
they
to
get age.
absolutely, and I'm glad that you said that, because there is an internalization of abuse, right? So you may yourself become a survivor, or you may become the abuser. And Ms. Rowe, I read online that you stated that you were known as Big Jackie. And you started to treat men a certain way as well. Why do you think that was?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
No problem. I said I read online that you had a name, a nickname title. It was Big Jackie, right?
Oh yeah. Oh no, that's only because there was another girlfriend of mine that was shorter than me. So people always called her Little Jackie and they called me Big Jackie. And it just
Gotcha.
stuck.
Got it. But you also mentioned that you started to have this persona that like no man will ever treat you this way. And you said
Oh,
that you kind of
absolutely.
started to behave in a certain way
That's how
towards.
I was. That's the type of chick I was. You know what I mean? I had a nonchalant. My father was a police officer, first of all. So my father never inflicted any type of pain on me. He's never scolded me. He's never yelled at me. So for a dude to come at me that way, I was like, what,
Mhm.
like, that's not acceptable over here. That's, we don't do that. And I just was like that type of chick. But what happened was, as I got older, I had my second son when I was 22. I wanted to settle down because I had my first son when I was 15. So I was in the streets kind of being a little wild. And then when I had my second son, I just said, let me calm down. I just happened to pick the wrong guy at the wrong time. And where I thought it was going to be some type of mentorship for my sons, it turned out to be a nightmare. You know what I mean? I was like, wow, I've never experienced nothing like that. I can't understand someone to say that they love you and then treat you and talk to you in that way. So I'm like, love, that's not love. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Love don't talk to me like that. Love don't treat me. And so we would have these battle discussions in the house of argument. And I would try to explain to him, you need to lower your tone. You need to lower and, calm down. Figure out how you're going to address me or how you're going to talk to me, because I'm already coming off the street as a, badass. So I don't need someone else to talk to me that way. You know what I mean? So that's how we used to bump heads, because you can't talk to me anyway. First of all, I'm West Indian like everybody here. And our culture is always taught manners. You know what I mean? Good afternoon, good night. Yes, thank you. No, thank you. And I think mannerism is a very big part of growing up in the home. So if you're not taught that from home and you go out in the street and a guy address you like, hey B, come here, you look, what, who you talking to? You're supposed to quote me like, hello, how you doing, sweetheart, my name is so and so. And so that's what we have to look for in our communities, is mannerism. You know what I mean? Because that is one of the signs that we call sheep in wool clothing. They come off all nice in the beginning, and you find out they're Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde after. You be like, oh, wait a minute, where did this character come from? You know what I mean?
yes.
So it's very important. And that's what me and my abuser used to clash all the time, because you're not talking to me like that. You know what I mean? So me being as a fighter, and I wasn't this big, he's the reason why I put on all this weight, because I wanted to
Gotcha.
get rid of him. I couldn't, yeah, I mean, oh my God, you should saw me. I wanted to get rid of this dude so bad that I would sit there. I said, maybe if I turned into a fat pig, he would leave. Because let me tell you, back in those days when you would call the police, if a guy stayed with you for more than 5 months or 3 months, it was considered common law. So you couldn't get rid of them. The
Oh,
cop
wow.
would come and the cop would come and say, I'm sorry, I can't do nothing. I used to call him. I said, excuse me, could you remove this person from my home? He'll go over to him and he'll ask him, how long was he there? And once he told him that he was there for 3 months or 2, he said, excuse me, we can't do nothing. You have to go to family court. Oh,
Well,
Wow.
Miss Rowe,
yes.
I will
Look it up.
say
Common
this.
law.
Well, I will say this with respect to the common law.
I
I'm
can't
not
hear
sure.
her. I can't hear her.
I said I will say this with the respect to the common law. I'm not sure about that distinction, but as long as someone's living with you for at least 30 days, you can't just put them out. You then have to go to court. So that becomes a
God, I
danger
cannot hear her.
when we are in.
I'll repeat what she's saying for you.
Okay.
So no, I was just telling her with respect to why the cops like couldn't let
God,
someone
I
out.
want to hear her so bad. Oh my God.
Oh wait,
I
let's
want
try
to.
to get this out. I'm sorry.
No worries. Ms. Rowe, she was saying that with respect to common law, right now, after 30 days, you can't actually just kick someone out of your home. I want to, regardless of the circumstance, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's
With,
to me
like
that
a police officer, what they're it's people sometimes refer to it as squatters' rights. So if I spent the night at your house, Ruth, for 30 consecutive nights, and on the 32nd night you wanted to get me out and I didn't want to get out, if the cops come, at that point the cops would say that you, even though you're just giving me a little place to crash, you would now have to go to court in order to get me out, adequately within the law. If it's under 30 days, they'll put them out for you. So perhaps that's what happened during that time. But, Miss Rowe, as you were talking also before too, back then, DV was viewed very differently than it is now, culturally.
Absolutely. And it's my follow-up question to you, Ms. Rowe, was why did you stay if you weren't used to that sort of behavior? And you kind of answered it, but could you tell me a little bit more about that scenario? Like you said, you had a child at this moment, but why is it that you continue to endure that?
Let me tell you what most women do when they're in these relationships, right? We become mothers. We become grandmothers. We become Captain Save-A-Ho. We become trying to save the situation, okay? That's what we
Absolutely.
become. We become and thinking that we can change this situation, that no, let me be the psychiatrist, the therapist, the this, the that. And so you just, because you see that there's a problem with the individual, and for some reason you just turn into superwoman, you turn into the therapist, you turn into everything because you believe you can change them. You see, when I was saying I would be telling him, lower your voice, don't speak to me like that. I thought for some reason, maybe I thought he was my child because I was scolding him. You understand me? So it's like something happened in your family with your upbringing, something, definitely damaged his mental on how he proceeds to deal with women. And I'm trying to figure it out. What happened here? Like, why, because one minute I had a Gemini for a boyfriend for 10 years. 1 minute he was nice. The next minute he was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I would be like, what the, woo? Really, like seriously, like that. You know what I mean? So I stayed there because it was another reason. There was a lot of killings during the time in the late 90s on domestic violence. It was on the rise and it wasn't respected. We were considered to be like, oh, throw it in a corner, like, domestic violence. Like, that's why when I actually met Farah at Brooklyn College years ago, it was a little YMCA, and I saw the Haitian community coming out, and I was like, oh my God, I started clapping, because I was taught that in most of the West Indian community, they keep quiet. Nobody talks about it. It's known to be, it's okay. No, it's not okay. You know what I mean? You don't have a right to talk to me this way. You don't have a right to put your hands on me. You don't have a right, if you want to go out and you want to drink, then cool. Get, settle down before you come home. You know what I mean? Don't come in here picking arguments and be angry about certain situations. Then you could say hi and he'd be like, who tell you to say hi? You know, there's something wrong there. You know what I mean? So I went from trying to cultivate my relationship to trying to see if it can work because I wanted a father figure for my sons. You know what I mean? And I really stood in there longer than I was supposed to. And it was like, I got used to it after a while. And no woman should never get used to that. You know what I mean? It became natural. And then I woke up and I said, hold up, this is not natural. This is not what love is. Like, you know, we will fight and then he want to have sex. I'm like, what? Are you crazy? Like, boy, back up. Oh, this is because I keep it 100. Me with domestic violence, I keep it 100. And
I believe you.
Yeah, I need people to understand that, number one, it's not your fault. And there's nothing wrong with you because they have this thing of trying to make you feel that you did something and it's your fault. No, it's your fault and there's something wrong with you. The thing is, we need to learn how to adapt and see the signs. The signs is very important. The sign number one is control. Once they start trying to control you and then loose, you know, like isolate you from your friends and telling you can't go outside. Like I had him calling my phone every 5 minutes. Where you at? What you doing? When you coming back? I said, you just called me 1 second ago. So how far could I have gotten to for me to let you know if I'm coming right back? Like, and one time, you know, I was in the beauty parlor and he came, and it was like about maybe a half an hour. He came in the beauty parlor peeking to see if I'm in the beauty parlor. Those are signs of insecurity. These are the men that are insecure because, and then another thing you got to think about, why are you watching me? What are you hiding? You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
What are you hiding? So it became, to answer your question, I became more of a mother because I was a young mother and I had a relationship with a man that I was trying to make him a father to my sons. You know what I mean? He wasn't the father of my biological kids. So I was trying to have that family structure. You know what I mean? And he was West Indian and I just wanted that, you know, culture. And I just, you know, when I saw that it wasn't right, I just like waited for it. I waited for all the killings to stop. And then it just happened where an opportunity came where that was it. He came in here one day, ran through the window and tried to jump through the window because I left him. Every time I left him, he would stalk me. He would find me. You know what I mean? And I would feel sorry. That's what we do. We feel sorry for them and we forgive them and you come back. No, once they put your hand on you one time, and mine wasn't really putting my hand, we used to fight. But once they hit you one time, leave out. That's it. Go. Yeah. Because that's giving them the opportunity to say that they can do that again. And they can't. Love doesn't hurt.
I love that you say love doesn't hurt. And I do want to revisit the signs of abuse a little bit later before we close out the show. But I do want to also have a conversation about what socializes women in the first place to believe that they can, number one, help or treat or mother these sort of abusive partners. And how does the law reinforce that? Because we stated so far that someone can be in your home for 30 days, regardless of circumstance, that not lawyers, but police officers can't kick them out. You said that police officers would come to your home knowing the circumstance, maybe I know for a fact that they'll tell them to walk it off, walk around the block. And then there's really no space or defense against this. So I do want to delve into some of the social implications of why women feel that way in the first place and how the law in and of itself reinforces that.
Well, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, just to go into your question and piggyback on some things that Ms. Rose said. I think the biggest thing socially is, women, victims of domestic violence didn't have the support and the safeguards that they have today. 20, 30 years ago, there were some organizations and different groups, different associations that were helpful, but it was more difficult. Up until recently, last year in 2019, did the Women's Justice Agenda. And part of that agenda addressed social justice, in which they revamped the whole Domestic Violence Survivors Act. So years ago, if someone was a victim of domestic violence, and let's say they were able to escape from the offender, and they had to live in a shelter, the state required them to pay a portion of that shelter cost. So if you think about it, barriers like that might stop a woman or a man or whomever from going to report DV, because let's say if I don't have a job and I can't afford to, pay for my shelter costs, then it's a waste of time. Um, then now also, I think there are more safeguards for women with respect to laws on harassment. Before, sometimes you'll hear stories of domestic violence incident that gets fatal, and everyone that you'll see witnesses, and they'll say, "Oh, it's been like that for years. She went to the she went to the police a lot of times, and nothing happened." Now, victims of domestic violence can go to family court and get an order of protection. Normally, if you go to criminal court, you have to have criminal charges coupled with that request. So there's new ways to allow women to not only get out, but feel comfortable that they can safely get out.
Do you believe that these things will be effective? The laws that you just stated?
I think they are helpful. We do see, we've seen a trend decline, but recently, honest, as of April of this year, since the COVID, between the start of COVID and mid-April, we've seen an increase of between 15 and 20% of DV calls and DV incidents. So while I think the law is helpful, ultimately it goes back to what Miss Rowe was talking about, like these signs that we have to see from early on. Because normally most victims of DV, it takes them a long time to call the police. Even when they do make that call, that's probably not the first incident between them. So we want to try to prevent those things. So perhaps when Miss Rowe and other victims, survivors rather, share their stories, we can do more education on what the signs are. Like for me, for example, when Miss Rowe said control is a sign, when after I graduated college, I was back in New York City. I started dating a guy who was really nice, professional, looked great on paper, but was really controlling. And initially, I didn't I didn't understand it, and I think that was part of the culture. So I grew up in a Haitian household. My parents have been married for about 43 years, and I grew up in a surrounding where it didn't matter what the relationship was going through, you stayed there. My mom had friends that were in abusive relationships and they stayed because, interestingly, if they left, the community frowned on the woman. So women didn't even have allies in their friends, in their family, so it was very different. So I say all of that to say, when I got to this relationship at about 24, 25, I wasn't sure. I was like, he is a little controlling. This kind of doesn't feel right, but he's a good guy. He has all these things going. And again, what I realized is because I had observed years and years of abuse, whether directly or indirectly, where people stayed, it made me feel like I had to, that I should keep fighting, that, oh, it's not that bad, and sometimes people will say, oh, well, they're not hitting you. And they limit abuse to just physical. So, it's a whole host of things that we educated and share with our daughters, our sisters, our sons.
Absolutely. And what role I want to expound upon that. What role does Caribbean culture play in staying? So, Miss Rowe, when you introduced yourself, you discussed shame. Miss Paul, when there's sort of cultural norms around you don't leave because then you're frowned upon because you didn't have a successful relationship or a successful marriage. So, what role does Caribbean?
No. I'm just I can't hear nothing that Cheryl is saying at all. I can't hear anything.
Oh no.
I cannot. And it's like really sad because I want to hear everything that she's saying. And even though you're going to tell me, you're not going to give me the whole full effect of what she's saying, but I cannot hear. But when I say shame, I found that the West Indian communities, especially the African communities, women feel ashamed to, they think it's a culture that's accepted. They think it's something that's a norm. And so they're comfortable with not saying nothing because they're used to the abuse. You understand me? And so if they're not taught, and there, and there's no outlets to let them know, like, there's so much now that domestic violence is out here big now. You know what I mean? Before, it was very hush. It was a very quiet situation, swept underneath the rug. So now that we have different outlets and so many things are being seen now national wide through social media, women are starting to get the courage to speak out. You know what I mean? They're starting to seek help. And then it's sad because the majority of the time, because I'm on the board of directors at my shelter, and half of the time when we do intakes and we get someone in there, you know they feel kind of like they'd rather be home with the abuser than being in the shelter. You know what I mean? Because it's like a shell shock situation of being away from your comfortable home, and it's just this one little, I would call a bed bug, that's there in the house that won't leave. You understand me? So it's like more time they come back because it's the comfortability of the home. It is not so much of the abuser, you know what I mean? Because it's, you know, they want help, but there's no, how do they get financial resources to get their own place, or to even if they stay at someone else's home, it's inconveniency after 2 weeks, especially if they have kids. You know what I mean? They don't feel comfortable. It's like a comfortability effect that most women feel when they are in abusive relationship. When you're comfortable in your home, you can't get that comfort anywhere else. You know what I mean? So half of the time, I would say 80% of the women that return home is because of comfortability. You know what I mean? And then it's another thing is financial resources. You know what I mean? The guy have a lot of the financial resources, so a woman will stay. For me, I always had my own. I had my own money. All I wanted him to do was to leave. Like, some guys are just stalkers. They just don't know how to leave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can see we're not getting along. It's the seesaw. A relationship is the ship. It's supposed to sail. You know what I mean? If the ship is this way and I'm down here, we're not sailing. You understand me? So you need to jump off the ship, or one of us got to jump board and be the bigger person. And the majority of the time, a woman is always the more compassionate person. She's the more humble person. She's the more peace, trying to make peace. So there's a lot of different dimensions and dialogue into a domestic violence relationship. People always say, well, why did you stay that long? Well, I always tell people, when you get into one, tell me how fast you got out. Some people say, oh no, well, I would have stabbed them. I would have did this. I would have did. Sure. Tell me how far you would have got. Some women's, congratulations, kudos. But that is not the message you want to send to another woman that's in a domestic violence relationship. That is not the message. A woman in a domestic violence relationship needs support. She needs support. That is number one. Like, she needs her friends. She needs her family. Doesn't matter how long she keep going back. She just needs that support, the strength to give her the courage to leave in two pieces, to leave alive, because you're not 5% times you don't get out. You don't get out. So it's not by choice. For me, I can speak for myself. It wasn't by choice that I wanted to stay. You know what I'm saying? It was situations and circumstances that said, wow, every time I went somewhere and the cops, nobody wasn't helping me, even if I had an order of protection back then, that wasn't valid. You know what I mean? The cops, I'm talking about late 90s. So now we're in 2020. You know what I mean? So this is a long way from domestic violence. Things have changed. The law has changed. The system has changed. It's still a little far off from being 100% perfect and safe for us, for women of domestic violence. I just feel so sad for the young babies, because I tell you, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, 1.5 million women were killed by the hands of domestic violence. You can Google and look at the stats. Every second, a woman is being abused by domestic violence. So the ratios of how many deaths, she said, wait. They die rapidly. Like, it's like a number one killer. You know what I mean? We have COVID-19 now. Like, every second a woman is deceased from domestic violence. Do you understand? Because there was a video I had showing on one of my page on there. Like this guy, this Puerto Rican guy walked into the salon. The lady was sitting there blowing her hair to the back. He came in there with a knife and he stabbed her 100 times. Her friends, people in the store tried to pull him away and pull him off, but he wouldn't. He just kept on stabbing and stabbing and stabbing until she was dead. And then he laid on her. He was at peace. Because in their mind, they're saying that I can't have you, no one else can have you. That's a mental thing. That's a mental, like a lot of these men we need to figure out why they so angry. Why are you so mad? You know what I mean? There's a lot of men that we need to have more of a group, more mental groups, or more mental, more just men support groups to help men, because they're dealing with a lot. If you have a boyfriend that drinks constantly, smoke weed, you know what I mean, get high, that's a red flag. You know what I mean? So let's talk about the red flags. You know what I mean? There's so many red flags that women sometimes see and we turn the other cheek. No, when those red flags come on, bing, 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 it's time for you to figure out your escort, how you leaving. There's this video that I also put on my page, and I want everybody to see this. This girl was I thought this was so smart. This was on TikTok, and this was brilliant. When I saw this, I started streaming this all over the world, because in a time like this, I feel so bad because of COVID-19. I know domestic violence is on the rise even more. You know?
Oh, absolutely. And let's hold off on the video for now. I do think I know which video you're talking about, and we'll share it with our constituents after the fact. But I do want to you've mentioned a lot of things that I hope we have enough time to discuss. But some of those things are language. People say, and I know I asked it, but I asked it because I knew the audience would want to know, why did you stay? Language like that makes it seem as though it's a choice. You've discussed red flags, but I do want to finish. I want to give Miss Paul an opportunity to discuss the role of culture in women staying in these sort of relationships and or believing that they can be therapists or be coaches or mothers to these men who are actively abusing them.
Thank you, Ruth. And I'm sure
I can hear you.
So, Ms. Rowe, you ended up touching on some things that we talked about a while ago. I mentioned Governor Cuomo's 2019 Women's Justice Agenda, in which they specifically carved out an area regarding social justice relating to domestic violence. So making it easier for women to be able to leave and sustain themselves. When you mentioned sometimes the reluctantness is that they're comfortable at home. They can't stay at someone's house for many days. Maybe they're not the breadwinner. Maybe they're not working at all. So now, so many years ago, they used to have women pay a portion of the shelter, the rent per se for the shelter where they were going. So now they no longer do that. Now they increase harassment laws. Now they make it easier for a person to get order of protection against another person without having a criminal charge. So you can go to
very nice. Okay.
So, it's a big thing. And I think as a society, we're moving in line. We have more women in just positions of power, just being out there to talk about some of the things that happen. While we know domestic violence is not limited to women only being victims, but because women have been a majority of the victims, now they have a voice to talk about these things. So not only do we have that, but I think it's then forcing us as a culturally to view this. Earlier, what we were talking about too, was some of the ethnic norms that prevent people from leaving. And I shared specifically at being a child of Haitian parents, just in the community, I've known women, my parents' friends, who were in abusive relationships, but if they left, people would judge the woman, not even the guy, and no one says anything. Everyone kind of because the culture, and I'm speaking generally, this is not all Haitian men, but as a child who grew up around them, the culture is very chauvinistic, When I keep saying that, the reason I got involved in domestic violence work is because I wanted to be an ally of victims and survivors. Because even culturally, I'll give you an example. in the Haitian culture, if you, Jacqueline, were married to a guy named Peter, you would be called the wife of Peter. No
Oh.
one would ever say your name. My parents have friends that the women, I don't know their names. So you're so attached to the male that it makes
Mhm.
it hard for you to even come out and go against that, because technically you're now going against a societal norm, how they perceive.
Mm.
And I think sometimes too, because that's why allies are so important. Us as women, us as men, we have to be there for victims, whether that means
Mhm.
give them a place to stay, you tell them where a number is, you tell them. The problem is people didn't have allies. Sometimes
Mhm.
people didn't tell that they were in a domestic violence incident because they were embarrassed. Then it looks like,
Mhm.
and I think Ruth mentioned this earlier in part of your question, where um, you wanting to report it, you look at yourself and wonder, did I fail at my marriage? So that's, or in my relationship. Then when you involve
Mhm.
children, it changes it. So I think we can never escape what ethnicity brings to this problem. And I
Or
think we,
why? Or just that
why?
question, why? People always asking why. I mean, it's like you don't think that someone that's being mentally and physically being abused knows that they're being abused and they know that they want to get out of it. Like, I don't understand. Like, there's some men that torment women, you know what I mean? That really torment them and belittle them so bad by letting them, no one else is going to want you but me. You're ugly, you know what I mean? Nobody's going to want you, you know what I mean? You're no good. So they belittle and they brainwash you to thinking that you're not worthy of anyone else's love. You know what I mean? Men's do that. So some women's, they'll fell victim to believing that they're everything that that man said. You know what I mean? So that self-confidence, that assurance of knowing who you are and knowing that this is wrong and this is right, those are things that we need to stress and do more of community groups on, to help to get the women that are in the corner that are afraid to speak out because they think that some of this stuff is okay. It is
Well,
not
well,
okay.
and I think, Miss Rowe, you're absolutely right. And I think that's why it's so important that we stand as allies in these situations. Because the
Yeah.
problem is, if someone's been married or with someone for 5, 10 years and they've been
Mm-hmm.
verbally abusing them day in
Mm-hmm.
and day out, they're not going to believe that they deserve any better.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
that is a good, I'm sorry to cut you off, Ms. Paul, because I do want to reserve, I see everyone on Facebook and YouTube
oh,
commenting. So continue to ask your questions. I'm going to reserve the last 10 minutes or so to ask the questions that you're asking. So keep asking those in the comments. We do see you. Thank you for logging on. I do think there's definitely a psychological impact of domestic violence, right? If you tell
Mm-hmm.
somebody, it could be Tyra Banks, you tell her she's ugly every day for 40 days, don't quote me on the number,
Mm-hmm.
but I started as a psych major. But if you consistently tell someone something, they will believe it. That's just a psychological principle, the most basic of psychological principles. And I think that language, as we discussed earlier, does play a large part. So though I have a lot of other questions that I want to ask, and I'm a little frustrated that it's already 7:40, I do want to go into what those red signals look like, what those red flags look like, rather. How does someone, number one, identify that they're in a domestic violence relationship? Because as you stated earlier, Ms. Rowe, people think that, oh, it can't happen to me until they're in it, right? What
Well,
are those red flags? And go ahead.
one of the, not to cut you, I'm sorry, one of the biggest
Okay.
red flag is when you're in a relationship, you relate. And if
mm,
your spouse is demanding and telling you to do things in not a nice way, that's a big red flag. If he's yelling at you, that's definitely a big flag. If he is telling you to dress a certain way and why are you going this place and when are you coming back, those are red flag. All of that is in one barrier of control. You know what I mean? Like there's no more of a relate. We're not related. Like, hi, honey, how was your day? What did you do today? Where did you go? How was, da, da, da. It's like, don't ask me no question. Where did you go? Once you see that type of tone change, it's a big red flag. Okay. And then when they're telling you that, oh, why is your sister coming over here so much? Or why is your girlfriend, you always with her? Trying to
isolate.
control your circle of
Surroundings.
friends and peers, that
Isolating
is
you.
a definitely big flag. Okay, wake up right there. And then the phone calls, that's another big flag. calling you. And, you know, when I was young, I thought it was cute. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So when a guy would call me 24 hours, like, oh, he clocking me. Oh, he on my shit. Oh, girl, you know, you feel good. But then, you know, you got to really read into it. Like, how many times are you going to really call me? You know, baby, I'm on my way. Well, why are you taking so long? Okay, how far are you? Are you in the, you know, are you in the driveway yet? Did you park the car? Did you put your feet out the car yet? How many steps
Oh,
are you to get into the house?
Mm.
That is called
God,
control.
that's a lot.
That's not cute. That's
That's a
not
lot.
stalking you, baby. You're not being. He's not on your shit. Excuse me, live. He's not on it. He's trying to change you. He's trying to put you in a cage. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so many things that we turn the cheek. You know what I mean? Because we're so, a girl like this, a kept girl that's always, you know, a guy give her everything. You take a certain type of L. When I say L, I mean you take a certain type of, you know, loss. You know what I mean? Because you're so used to the guy giving you everything. So if he has a bad deal, he throws something in it, you like, oh baby, you so crazy. You know, you pass it off.
You make
No, if he
excuses.
throws
Yep.
anything at you, it's what? No, you gotta go, because that's not respect. That's not respecting you. I feel like when there's a polished man out there in the world, he knows how to cultivate you. He knows how to talk to you. He knows how to calm you down. And it's not what he does, it's how he does it. He'll come across like, sweetheart, like if I was the one that was yelling, because you have some women that like to hit. I'm not putting this all on the men, because there's a lot of girls out there that like to hit on guys and be wanting to hit them, and a guy be like, stop. You gotta understand that when you have a partner that knows how to diffuse the situation by just being very polished, like, baby, you know, that hurts. You know what I mean? Like, you know, just always being calm. I know it's hard for people to believe, but if you can't be calm in a relationship and you can't each one teach one, then there's something there. You know what I mean? You don't like something about that person, and that's the bigger red flag. Because if you're
Mm.
not liking something about your spouse, then you can't say you can fix it, because if it happened more than once, then you know this is not who you pretended or who you fell in love with. Now that person is starting to show who they really are. So you got to wake up and look. You know, I'll say, fool me once, fool me twice, fool me three times. That's it. It's out. You got to wake up. We got to start looking at, what are you used to? What type of a woman are you? You know what I mean? Are you a woman that's cut from a fabric that's real soft, or do you like leather? You know what I mean? Are you very timid? Are you hard? Like, who are you? You know what I mean? And then this is how a man has to open up that floor for you and roll out the red carpet for you. Like, you know, speak to you with respect, court your respect, baby. How was your day? Let me rub your feet. Like, I'm not saying every day is a perfect day, don't get me wrong, but it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And how you speak to someone is very important.
That's true.
Absolutely. I thank you for that, Ms. Paul.
Just to piggyback on a couple of things Miss Rose said, when you described that some of these things you thought were cute, and I think that's something that I've been a victim to that, and we all are. Sometimes we get in relationships and it seems like that level of intensity is a show of interest, and it's good. You have to think about what's healthy and what's not. And I think a bigger part of this too is, I think it's easier to see red flags when you're in a better space yourself to enter a relationship. So by that, there are things that us as individuals who want to be loved and want to give love need to address and go through honestly. Like, I know it sounds good to say, oh, you should have it together before you get in a relationship, but you're more susceptible to an abusive relationship if you're just looking for love.
Exactly.
If you're looking for someone else to give you these things, you can be blinded by the red flags, and ultimately, because you want the love so much, you'll stay with all of the bad things. And lastly, I'll say, sometimes, okay, we're in a relationship and things are good, but something that just doesn't quite feel right, you know. And since I've been younger, people always say the old school rule: write a list of pros and cons, right? And sometimes, while that's not a perfect formula, what that does is when you kind of write out certain things about your mate, your spouse, you could have a list of the things that you want and their qualities, and just seeing the difference. I think sometimes when you see it for yourself, it has a different impact. And then, we always think it's not us. So when we started this conversation, I talked about the importance that DV is not just a couple's disagreement. DV can be among siblings, among in-laws, people that just live together. So I think
Great point.
we limit what we think is DV. So if we're limiting that, then we're limiting our response to these situations.
And I'm glad you said that. And I'm sorry to cut you off, just because we're starting to run out of time, and I do want to just clarify some things, just in case they were misconstrued. I do want to make it clear that there is not necessarily a type of woman that enters like a domestic violence relationship. So oftentimes there are
nice point too.
Yeah. So I think some of the things may be misconstrued that way, based on what was said. But there needs to be a sort of self-worth there just to lay the foundation, but anyone can actually find themselves in these scenarios. DV does affect a wide range. I'm sorry, 1 second, Ms. Rowe. Just so that I can finish, I just want to make sure that everyone that's in the comments that are listening tomorrow, we are going to discuss men. In June, we are going to be discussing LGBTQ, the population of LGBTQ, how language affects domestic violence. So we are going to definitely entertain all the nuance, Ms. Paul, that you've suggested, that you've discussed, but I do want to make sure that women are at the center of this conversation, because oftentimes when we discuss women or Black people or gay people, we tend to move to the majority. And I just want to make sure we create this space for women, right? At this moment, 1 in 10 women are raped by intimate partners. 1 in 7 women have been injured by intimate partners. Close to 10 million women are experiencing DV. And I want to be sure that we maintain women at the center of this conversation and those who identify as women. We are going to move into, Ms. Rowe, you can say what you're going to say. We're going to move into questions, and then, of course, we're going to discuss solutions and close. But, of course, Hack is open to this conversation continuing via Facebook, YouTube, and our Instagram. But, yes, Ms. Rowe?
Okay, I also want to make a very strong point about the confidence, because a lot of time, we talk about women that don't have confidence, they need self-confidence. There's women such as myself that have a lot of confidence, you know what I mean? And you might run into the wrong guy that just don't like a confident woman, you know what I mean? And that'll make a guy just want to break you, you know what I mean? And that's another red flag, because if you're there to help me to build, to be, a family, or just to help me. Like I always say, if I bring the sheets, bring the blanket. You know what I'm saying? Like, bring something to the table. Like, we're here, each one teach one. Like, every man out there needs a good woman, and every woman out there needs a good man, and every child out there needs good parenting. You know what I mean? So we owe it to ourselves for us to every day to try to be better, to try to get help and try to seek help. If there's something wrong, you know what I mean, figure out what's the problem. Like, if you can't talk to your homeboy, you can't talk to your father, figure out who you can talk to. Like, ain't nobody too cool not to ask for help. Like, we got to stop that. We need to just know
Can
how
you say
to.
one more time, Ms. Rowe? No one is too cool to, please repeat that
to
part.
ask for help.
Absolutely.
No one is too cool to ask for help, and no one is to be ashamed to ask for help. Like, we're all, look at this. Like, one thing I learned from COVID-19, no one is above it. No one is underneath it. We are all one. It brought everybody together, every celebrity, every planet, every human being on this planet had to stay still, because there was some type of, we still don't know what's in the air, what's killing us. We still don't know, but the government and the politicians and the people that run the world, they said we can't go this and we can't do that. We had to abide. But one thing we did see was a lot of people losing their family left and right, like bodies, like just pouring on like ants coming to get a breadcrumb. And so this is why we need to realize right now at this time and point that life is precious. Life is very important, and we need to understand that we need each other at some point. So why fight amongst each other? Why be, the barrier of want to kill your own brother, want to beat up on your woman, and, just being miserable? Like, what is your problem? Figure out what's wrong with you before you go into a circle and being so unhappy and just being mad. Like, I need people to understand that not everybody is unhappy. You know what I mean? People are looking for love. People want to be happy. You know what I mean? Like, happiness is a beautiful thing. Love is a wonderful thing. So why not have love more over than anything? You know what I mean? Like, why do we do this to ourselves? Like, the world is a beautiful place. Look, this is what I've noticed, because I did a PSA and I said, why isn't anybody doing a PSA and asking everybody, how did COVID-19 change your life? What did you learn from it? What did you really learn from COVID-19? That's what we need to talk about next.
I think that's a great conversation. And because I do a lot of the programming, I might actually take that. Thank you, Ms. Rowe. How has it? And I think, and go ahead, Ms. Paul.
Sorry, when Ms. Rose talked about just how COVID brought us to a standstill, it just for me reminded me, and I want me to reinforce that domestic violence is not a poor people's problem. It's not just a woman's problem. It's not just a man's problem. It affects any and everybody. Rich people have DV drama. Poor people have it too. So that's why that we are allies, because that's why victims are usually so embarrassed and so overwhelmed. That makes them look bad. No, actually, you're a hero. You are standing up for yourself when you ask for help, when you take that first step. So I just want to make sure. And of course, I always bring some info. I do want to give you some numbers that are 24-hour hotline.
Yes, absolutely.
We're going to end with that. We're definitely going to end with resources. I do want to get to the questions. We have a couple of good ones, and we have like 7 minutes. So let's keep the responses a little short. And it's frustrating because this is a topic that can go on forever and ever. The psychological nuance, the sort of socioeconomic understanding of domestic violence. So we might need a part 2, but for now, let's answer some questions and then we'll definitely share resources. We have Deval Green on Facebook. He said, I read of this term called the honeymoon stage, where things are perceived as good in the relationship. Are there still warning signs during this stage?
I'd like to tackle that question. I think Mr. Green, we thank you for your question. What's interesting is a honeymoon stage in itself is normally considered a stage where it's bliss. So you're actually not scrutinizing things that you would normally look at the regular course of things. So I think the honeymoon stage is not a great indicator of whether or not you see these red flags or react to them, because in that stage, you're quote unquote blinded. I think what it is sometimes in hindsight, after we can say yes. So I think signs are always there. You just have to be on the lookout for that.
Got you. Thank you. We have Naisa Pivergi. I may have missed a part of this, but there's an increase. I'm happy she said this. There's been an increase of the rate of DV during this pandemic, particularly what is currently being done for the DV victims. And her second question, what are some of the legal implications and issues you've witnessed among immigrant women? And I'm gonna keep it to women just because women are gonna be a forefront, but tomorrow you can ask this question again for men in DV situations. So what are the legal implications of what's happening now, given the rise of DV during the pandemic, and what are some legal issues for immigrant women in DV situations?
Can I just show them this real quick?
Yeah.
Miss Rowe. We're gonna go to Miss Rowe. We're actually gonna go to resources after the questions.
Oh no, because somebody just asked about how to deal with the DVD right now. I thought this was brilliant. How this young lady got out of her domestic violence relationship during COVID-19. She picked up the phone and she was being bit. I mean, like when you see the video, you start crying. And she pretended she was calling the Pizza Hut place. And she called the police department. You know what I mean? And the police, they carried it with her. And she's like, no, I know. She said, they said, you called the wrong place. I said, no, I didn't. You know what I mean? So there's different ways that you can find to get out of the domestic violence. First of all, if you're in a house with somebody right now, please leave and find somewhere else where you're comfortable. That's just number one. If you're in a relationship with a domestic violence in a house with someone that you're being abused, please find a way to leave and get out immediately, because it's only going to get worse.
Nayasa, to finish up this latter part of your question, I do agree with you, and I think we said this on the earlier portion, as of April of this year, the DV cases have increased by about 15 to 20%. With respect to what is currently being done. So initially at the height of when we hit that apex, because they were limiting calls to 911, I think a lot of folks were not making those calls unless it was, you know, a quote unquote emergency. But since then, the media and the government agencies have reiterated that you can still call 911. What else they've done during this is they've extended and made not only the YMCA, but the New York State DMV hotline 24 hours. So you could call at 2 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. Before, there was, some of these places were limited. So since the start of COVID, they have increased those. They also have increased the resources. So you still have to make that call to get to the right shelter, to get to the right place. So there have been, and I think you said, what are some of the implications that, I think,
women.
I think in general, just to go back to specifically the New York State Women's Justice Agenda, it's not tied to, it can be any woman, whether irrespective of your immigration status. So I think now, because DV is such a big issue and given it the due respect that it deserves, that they are not, you know, focused. If that's your question, they're not limited. The reason they're not limited to, you know, people with no immigration status. So I hope I answered that, Nyasa.
Thank you so much. And then we have, I'm not quite sure if this is a question or a commentary. Floyd Jarvis says, smoking weed is a red flag for domestic violence. The data says the prevalence of alcohol in the home increases the chances of intimate partner violence. Never heard of ganja. I think what was said earlier at 7:33 was not necessarily.
I didn't say that specifically. That's not a.
No, it wasn't what you said.
Think what Miss.
Okay. What Miss Rowe was saying was, she said the consistency of smoking it, or if you're smoking weed to get away from something. So there was context there. We did not state that smoking weed is a red flag for domestic violence. Again, the context was when you're doing it consistently to avoid something. And oftentimes that may be you're attempting to avoid an insecurity or things that lead to abuse. In the last couple, I think that's the end of the questions. If you do have one question, we might be able to squeeze it in, but you have to type really quickly. But to end, I do want to highlight, because Ms. Rowe, what you said about the video is great. You can, oftentimes we say things like, just leave, call a friend, have an ally. But if you have someone's mind, you have their body. We know that through history. And also that person is over your shoulder, right? So how do you call someone? How can you speak to DV centers when your abuser is in the other room? And what Ms. Rose stated was, like, you can call 911 and attempt to pretend like you're ordering a pizza, I think is what the TikTok video was. We will do some research as to whether or not they'll be able to identify that as a call for help, but you may want to continue those sort of ruses in order for the person on the other line to get it.
Okay. I have this,
and Colleen, I'll talk with you offline. We would love to have you hack or anything else where your comments and your story can be relevant. So we appreciate that.
Absolutely. And Colleen, you're also welcome to join us on Thursday. Everyone in the chat, we do have a therapy open house for those who have experienced domestic violence, regardless of gender, and you're able to have a confidential interaction with a therapist and a coach.
That's what I was about to say, that I partnered up 2 years ago with Global Trauma Center on Church Avenue. It's a Haitian company that they give you money to come and speak to them. There's a group of psychiatrists that are willing to speak to you for free.
Perfect. Ms. Rowe, can you? That's your church?
No, it's not. It's it's not a church. It's a center.
I thought it was at Hope City Church. I'm sorry.
Got it.
It's global research. Yeah.
Ms. Rowe, can you take a minute to share the information for Face My Abuse? And then Ms. Paul, please share resources as well. And then we'll close out. Again, this conversation about domestic violence is not over, but I do want to make sure that in discussing this, we also know that there are other options.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. You know, even though y'all caught me off guard, I wasn't really, ready, but whatever.
We love having you, Ms. Rowe, trust me.
It's fine. I just want to say, guys, I love you guys out there, men and women. And to follow my groups, every social handle is Face My Abuse. FACEMYABUSE. Everything. Gmail, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everything. Just Google Face My Abuse. You'll see all of my handles. Thank you for having me, lady. This was a very well needed discussion.
Thank you
Just
so
always
much.
remember, love does not hurt.
Yes, I love it.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And it was an honor to share the panel with both you and Ruth. I think everyone in the comments, look out for me for city council run next year.
Okay.
Always got to play. Above all, again, DV does not discriminate men, women, anyone. Let's continue to be allies, and let's continue to have faith in the Lord and just stay encouraged. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. And to close, I just want to remind you guys of the incidences. Though we said that domestic violence has raised, unfortunately, via due to Corona, but I do want to remind everyone that on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. That relates to about 10 million women and men. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner violence. Domestic violence can be physical, but it can also be emotional and verbal. 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner, and that includes slapping, shoving, and pushing. This also includes sexual violence, which is rape or sexual assault. So please keep these numbers in mind when you are thinking of DV survivors and victims. Keep this number in mind, though you may not have experienced it, you may want to give it to others. Consider donating to this cause. And I would just want to remind you of 2 things that these women said. Domestic violence does not discriminate, and domestic violence does not hurt. Please keep in touch with HACK via social media and email at hack_US on Instagram. Thank you so much, ladies. I really appreciate this conversation. I wish it could last and last and last, but unfortunately, we are done here. Thank you again. And we are continuing our conversation about domestic violence through the month of June. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.